Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Harder Not Smarter podcast. Today we have a incredible guest. We have Tim Sheehy, who's former SEAL, entrepreneur, and now a Senate contender for Montana. He's going to be going through the campaign process. Honestly, my personal hell would be a politician, so I'm thrilled that there are people like Tim that are taking up the baton and running with it. We were just having a conversation about how important it is for our generation, especially veterans who have served, who have done their time in service, who have life experience, to actually step up to the plate and take back a lot of the stuff that we disagree with. So, Tim, welcome to the show. It's a privilege to have you on.
Yeah, great to reconnect. For all the guests, Kevin and I went to the academy together. We're in the teams together. And as is typical in the military, you work with somebody super closely. Your brother's with somebody. You may carry them off the battlefield without legs, and then you'll shake their hand. You won't see them or talk to them for a decade, and then you run into them, and it's like you were with them yesterday. So great to see you again, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So you went through. I remember you were a bit of a legend at the academy. You were the guy that somehow secured a spot at Ranger School for one of the summer tours. You came back as honor man. So you weren't even commissioned yet. You were a midshipman, which is kind of like this weird limbo position in the military where we have zero importance, but we think we're important at the time. You go up to Ranger School competing with some of the top military or top Army people, and you come back as honor man. Tell us a little bit about that experience and what that was like.
Well, first of all, it was an honor to go. It really helped instill in me the appreciation for all of our different branches of the military. My wife, was a Marine. I met at the academy. And I know you had a similar situation there. And marrying a Marine, I got to know the Marines really well. I went to Marine Corps Mortar School. I went to Ranger School, Recon School, Airborne School. So came to appreciate the fact that, our military capability, especially in the special operations world, is really rooted in the fact that each of our distinct special operations community has unique lineage and very unique capabilities. And sometimes as SEALs, especially in the last 15 years, as we've been, the cool guys, before 2010, no one knew what the hell a SEAL was. They didn't even know what we were. Everyone talked about special forces and Delta and everything. But of course, after Bin Laden, we became, the jewel in the crown of special ops. And sometimes, we spent too much time smelling our own farts and like, hey, we're the coolest guys. Like nobody can touch us. And the truth is,
we've all seen the Charlie Sheen movie.
Exactly. The most accurate depiction of Navy SEALs ever.
Honestly, it probably is.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the golf scene and the party scene. But in any event, so actually how it happened is my plebe year, Kevin, we didn't know each other well at that point, but I resigned from the academy. I quit. Basically, the end of my first semester, I was like, hey, we're at two wars, fighting door to door in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, I'm not going to sit here and go to school while like we have wars going on. Like every other dumb 18-year-old kid, I'm like, hey, the war is going to be over by the time I graduate. Yeah. So I got to get over there. I got to do my.
Got to chase that dragon.
Yeah, this is exactly right. Like slay beasts. This is our generation's World War II. I have to do my part. I refuse to tell my kids that while every other able-bodied man was defending America after 9/11, I was taking Calc 3 and thermodynamics. So I quit and went to my company office, said, hey, here's my letter, I'm quitting. And at that point, I think I was like number one in our company and, highly ranked in our class. Not that it matters, but he was like, hey, you're like the top guy and you're quitting, leaving. Like, yeah, I'm going to join. I'm going to enlist. I'm going to Baghdad tomorrow. Like, I got to get some. And he's like, okay, great. Well, cool. I'll take your letter. Good luck. But there's a guy I want you to meet with before you leave. Go down to Dogman Hall tonight and meet with a guy named McDonald. And I'm like, okay, like, sure. I'll go down to meet this guy. And, I'm an 18-year-old plebe, which is, as low as you get. And I go down to Dogman Hall that night and looking around, the cafeteria. At that point, you're not allowed in. There's the plebe, little dry dock restaurant. And, so I'm uncomfortable. I see this, I look for the name tag McDonald. I see this guy. It's a special forces colonel, Army special forces colonel. And I'm like, wow, okay, this guy's way up here. I'm down here. Why in the world am I talking to this guy? And we sit down and he says, hey, I hear you're quitting the academy and leaving. I'm like, yep, I got to go fight. He's like, yeah, well, I just came back from my third deployment. This is fall of 2004. He's like, and, what do you think you need to do in the war? Why are you leaving now? I'm like, well, it's going to be over by the time I graduate, in 4 years. I got to go now. And he's like, well, let me tell you something, son. Like, I just did my third deployment. Like, this is a generational fight. It's not close to being over. And frankly, I don't need more lance corporals and specialist door kickers. I need leaders. I can tell you the greatest thing I need on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan right now is young leaders. I need smart lieutenants and captains who can make decisions in the field, because right now this is a sergeant's and a captain's war. It's not a general's war. It's not a colonel's war. This war will be won at the lowest leadership level possible. And therefore, I need sharp guys who can make those decisions, the right decisions, in a very complex operating environment. It's like, so I urge you to stay, finish your education, because that's what we really need. But in the meantime, I'm working on a program, because at that point there was really challenging interoperability between the SEAL teams and our Army community. Early in the war, it was a disaster. I mean, from Red Wings to Roberts Ridge, there was just two great groups of people that couldn't quite figure out how to make it work. We had different words for, a four-man team. We called them a boat crew. The Army called them a team. We were a troop. They were a squadron. We carried MP5s. They're carrying M4s. We're wearing, Raytheon radios. They've got, everything was different. Our frequencies didn't match. Our terminology didn't match. We didn't plan missions the same way. So it just didn't mesh well. And he said, what we got to do is the Army's never going to speak Navy because they're the biggest partner. SEALs are like 5% of SOCOM. So the Navy's got to learn to speak Army. So I'm building a program to basically take guys who are going to be SEALs out of the academy and go, experience Army special operations. So when they get to the teams, they're more ready to plug into the SOTF world that you're going to operate in. Do you want to be a part of that? And I was like, yeah. He's like, okay, well, here's the deal. I'll send you down there, but you're going to have to finish your school commission and graduate. And I said, okay, let's do it. So that's how it all started. And it was a great experience. And you know what? As soon as I got my trident, I was deployed 5 days later. And, I walked into the team room in Baghdad, and guess what? Two guys in the squadron we were operating with, I went to Ranger School with, and every single deployment across 5 deployments, I would work with or run into somebody that either I'd gone to Ranger School with, or during my exchange time with the Ranger Regiment, or 5th Group, I'd worked with, or the experience that I'd gained became critically important to how I could work alongside our Army comrades. And every single deployment, bar none, as you well know, we were embedded and to some extent with the Army. So having that working knowledge, knowing their vocabulary, and having that network was incredibly helpful and important. And like I said, it was an honor to be a part of that community as well.
That's something that I think a lot of people...
conversation with Stephen Kaplan. We had that same conversation with Stephen Kaplan last week about embedding with SF teams, yep, and how, invaluable that was for him moving forward in his career. So that's what an awesome experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of people just don't understand about the special operations community is how difficult it is to communicate, like with Air Force people, with Army people, with Navy people, with Marine, yep, people. That's like having people from Amazon and Google and Facebook and Netflix, probably even more different than that, trying to come together and create a collaborative project that runs efficiently every time. The languages are different, the gear's different, the cultures are different. Now you need to put us into a high stress, highly dynamic environment, and people need to be able to talk. And these are all the things that we learned from the Iran hostage situation, where it was complete, utter disaster. Everything, it was super complicated. They had pretty much every branch of the services coming together with a very complicated mission profile with moving parts, and it just fell apart. And I think that was an eye-opening experience for our military to be like, we need to figure out how to have all these different entities communicate with one another. And the SEALs are right in the middle of that, because, the Army and the Marine Corps, they have combat elements where people can flow in and out of. The Army has regular infantry, they have SF, they have the Rangers, the Marine Corps has similar stuff. But the SEALs, we don't have another group that we can really interact with that you can flow in and out. You go into the SEALs and you're just there. And so it's very difficult for us to have residential knowledge and interaction outside of doing stuff like what you did, where we go over to Ranger School, we go over to the Q course, we go over to MARSOC assessment and learn about these different communities. So, the experience that you had is extremely valuable, and I'm sure it'll play dividends for you, and has played dividends for you throughout life, just learning to
and the other
talk
piece
with
to
other
that,
people.
No, you're absolutely right. But it's also when it happens is important too. The sequencing matters. Like children, we learn differently at different phases in our life and career. And unfortunately, in the military, especially in the officer corps, NCO corps as well, by the time we start talking about joint education and joint doctrine and joint training, like it happens at like the 04, 05 level. Guys are 40 years old, and now finally they're talking about doing stuff jointly. And it's like, by that point, it's like, literally the human brain is still developing in the 20s. Like when you're in your 20s, you are absorbing what's happening around you, and it's shaping how you think and how you do things. And for me, I think going to Ranger School when I was 19, and embedding with Fifth Group and the Rangers and learning all that, was super formative for me because, it kind of builds those receptors to like, hey, because that is channel ways to other things too, because then it's not just the Ranger Regiment and SF, it's understanding the Army Airborne community and the light infantry community and the heavy infantry community, because all those guys are a part of that. And at any point during the Iraq and Afghan wars, we were always dealing with the battle space owners, always dealing, some of the worst gunfights I was ever in were with the 104th Airborne guys, conventional Army in the Korengal Valley when I was embedded there as an LNO from the SEAL Task Force. And, but knowing their language and knowing their lineage, hey, we were all at Sand Hill together. We all went to airborne school, and all that. So I think when it happens is important. The military focuses on joint stuff so late in the careers. It's like your receptors are already hardened, and you're already programmed in how you think. And I think it's really important to expose some of our folks to that earlier on, because it's so critical.
Yeah, I'm super thankful that my journey took me the way I did. I wasn't as I guess far along in the process of quitting it as you are, but once service selection came out our senior year and I didn't get SEALs, my immediate thought was, whatever, I'm out. I'm just going to resign my commission. 3.5 years in, I just over a semester left, and I'm trying to figure out how I can still get to the SEAL teams. I talked to one of the officers there about it. How do I resign this? What happens? Ultimately, I stuck with it, and I went Marine Corps, which was a huge blessing for me. A lot of the guys that didn't get SEALs that went to the surface warfare community and came back in, they basically described it as a 2-year purgatory sentence. Like I got zero practical experience that helped me other than writing a fit rep or something like that. Where I went to the Marine Corps, learned the 5-paragraph order, learned about mission planning, learned about mission briefing and tactics. It took me longer. It took me 4 years to come back over. But during that time, I was using and learning applicable information that carried directly over to the SEAL team. So I'm completely on board with what you're talking about, getting that exposure, that cross-pollination, cross-services. I think it's extremely valuable, and the military should work harder to do more of that type of exchange opportunity.
Well, one thing I started proposing, not proposing, but talking about around the time I got out, was even looking at a more aggressive exchange program within the SOCOM community. Because like you mentioned, we're tribal. We're inherently tribal. Humans are tribal by nature. That's our biology. And that manifests itself in so many different ways. But like no one's more tribal in modern day civilization than commando communities around the world. We are by definition the strictest, most extreme form of tribe you can find, other than maybe professional sports. So that identity is really hard. And even if all the technology and all the terminology and all that lines up, just getting these tribes to drop the egos and the tribal obsessions and just say, hey, let's just take the rank off, take the insignia off. Let's just talk about how we're going to get this mission done together as safely and effectively as possible. And part of that could be, a more aggressive exchange program where, like a command position, like a SEAL platoon leader can go be an ODA team leader. An ODA team leader can be a SEAL platoon leader, and a MARSOC element commander can, and actually create that exchange of competency. Because at the end of the day, yes, occasionally there may be a certain mission that, listen, you've got to be a SEAL to lead, you got to be a Green Beret to lead. But let's face it, we all work together for 20 years. We're all, for the most part, pretty interchangeable, with the exception of some very specific mission sets. And I think that'd be a really strong way to just build more coherence amongst our soft community. But that'll probably never happen. So.
I was just about to say that somebody's in leadership's head is just like popping right now, like thinking about that, like the logistics of that. But it's
That
really
artery in
it
the
makes too
eye
much.
just flexing.
Yeah, it makes too much sense, and it wouldn't be difficult to do. I mean, and it would be easy.
Yeah, be totally easy. I mean, I spent more time on missions with Army counterparts from any number of the different, every single, literally PSYOPs, civil affairs, SF, Rangers, all the elements of Fort Bragg, like, every single one. And I mean, for the most part, we were interchangeable. I mean, yeah, again, there are occasional missions where you can't be, but, we can all work together just fine.
So it sounds like you got your fair share of combat once you finally graduate and join the SEAL teams. It takes about a year and a half, 2 years to make it through the pipeline, depending on any hurdles and obstacles you have along the way. Tell us a little bit about your experience in the SEAL teams. I know that you had some serious combat, and then you've also had some medical issues and mishaps because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate, unfortunate, lucky, unlucky. It's hard to say what, but I graduated, I graduated the academy, and 4 days later checked into Indoc. So started in May, and then just jammed right through, training, and then got my Trident, and immediately shipped out overseas, like a week. I moved from San Diego to Virginia, dropped my stuff, grabbed my bag, and was in Baghdad, within.
It was like 2009 by this point?
Exactly, yeah, 2009. And was in Baghdad essentially immediately. And then from there, it was like, 5 deployments, Iraq, Afghanistan, none of the Middle East, with a quick trip to Afghanistan, then, South America, and then, an SDV one later on. And for the most part, I mean, it was every single one of those deployments was, operational. And, 2 of those deployments specifically were just, I mean, they were constant combat every day. I mean, it was, like you guys, I mean, those days in Afghanistan that was the height of the surge, the height of everything going on there, VSO especially, and got really fortunate with my deployments from counterterrorism, with the Joint Task Force to, VSO, village stability operations. So I got to see all different manner, of different layers of how we were operating there. Got to, be a squad leader, platoon OIC, platoon AOIC, ops officer, LNO. So really got a nice out experience, but, it was heavy. I mean, I think it was, over, 100 different, direct fire, indirect fire engagements through the time there. Had a lot of friends wounded and killed, especially those VSO days when it was all daylight, ridgeline to ridgeline combat, mud hut to mud hut. I mean, it wasn't what people think of in the movies with SEALs. We're all sneaky, like it was just straight up us and 50 Afghans and a bunch of Army infantry from Second ID. We're just, online, daytime, just gunslinging every day. It was nothing fancy, nothing. It was like old school combat. And that was the mission. And a lot of people at that time were saying, hey, this isn't a SEAL mission. This isn't what SEALs are made for. We're not supposed to be doing this. And I don't necessarily disagree that we were using, a scalpel as a hammer. At the end of the day, what I always told my guys is, listen, we're SEALs. Like, we do whatever we're asked to do, and we do it the best. We do it better than anybody, especially those damn Green Berets, right? So it's like, like if they're going to give us a mission, we're going to do it, and that's what we're here to do. Like, they told us to go, parachute in this village, or helicopter in this village, train these people how to defend themselves, and fight, and that's what we're going to do. I know you want to sneak around at night and capture bad guys and free fall into every mission, with your thermo night vision goggle blended stuff. But like, guess what? We're here daytime, AK-47s, throwing hand grenades, and that's the job. And, so it was a leadership challenge for sure. Just very kinetic, getting guys wounded. I got wounded, a lot of my guys did. I lost my AOIC, lost my chief, our OIC, that I had to go take over a different platoon because, it was a tough environment. But, I mean, at age 26, the amount of leadership responsibility you have in that position is pretty crazy. And then, you learn a lot about yourself, and a lot about, obviously, the fundamentals of leadership and how to make some tough decisions in some tough scenarios. So, but yeah, it was an honor to do it. After, a few Middle East pushes, went to SDV, which at that time, there was a bit of a resurgence happening in the undersea community, as there was kind of the focus to pivot back to China And, the teams had really left their core, which of course the SEALs were supposed to be our maritime special operations tip of the spear. And the truth is, very few SEALs were competent in complex undersea operations. Yeah, we could throw on a dragger and dive, but that 2012, 2013 timeframe, we'd really kind of seeded our really core maritime roots in a way that made us unique, like, long range submersible operations, deep sea mixed gas diving, the ability to do long range insertion over the beach operations, air insertion to undersea, air extraction. I mean, the kind of stuff that you don't just hop on a Humvee, load your M4 and go take care of business. Like, it's months of planning, submarine schedules, getting a nuclear submarine, a multi-billion-dollar asset to, drop 5 guys off and come back. Like, those are things that require 4-star secretary level planning and approvals, intelligence community interaction. And so that was a total departure from what I've been doing for years, which was seat of the pants, counterinsurgency, counterterrorism, whack-a-mole every day, to, all right, very deliberate planning, months, years in advance, a lot of interagency coordination, a lot of approvals, and but it was great, and I learned a ton. Eventually, unfortunately, I had a dive accident while I was on an training operation, and ended up going to the chamber for a while. That knocked me out medically from being able to operate, basically for an indeterminate amount of time. And they're like, hey, you can't operate anymore. You can go on staff and be a paper pusher. I'm like, listen, if I can't be a SEAL, I'm not going to sit around and push paper. So let's find out what the next phase of life holds. And that's when I started my company. So
I think that's a huge topic for a lot of guys to understand. A good number of veterans got out on their own terms, on their schedule, knowing that this is going to be their last date, and then they're going to go do something else. Where yours was, your hand was forced to some regard. You might have been able to stand for a little longer, kind of languishing in purgatory, but for the most part, you're told you can't operate anymore. This is going to be your end date, and you had to figure things out on the fly. And I think that's really challenging for a lot of veterans in and of itself to refine purpose and realign yourself. But you were told you can't be a SEAL anymore. Now you need to go figure out something on your own. How did you deal with that news, that transition?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. As you know, I mean, we're a tribe. We're like super focused on mission. We're super focused on like finding that meaning for us every day. That's different. I mean, we just are. It's a different breed that chooses to join. Then it's a very different breed that chooses to join communities like ours and go through the hell it takes to be a part of that community. And that fulfillment, that brotherhood you get, and that mission is so core to our identity. That it's hard to take that off. And I think for a lot of us, we wear that armor like at night, but the problem is then that armor becomes our identity. And like when we take that armor off, a lot of guys, there's nothing underneath. They've forgotten that there's more to you than the armor you're wearing. And you better make sure that you don't lose your soul as Tim, as Kevin, as Greg, because if you do, when you take that armor off, you're lost in life. And we see that with a lot of guys. They get out, and basically as soon as they're out, they're either trying to get back in, they're going down the contracting route because that's the next closest thing, or they're drifting, they're lost, and I mean truly lost, and that's something that shouldn't be happening, but it is. And for me, I think that's part of the reason I started a company was I look back, again, it takes years of perspective to start to untangle all this, but I definitely had some serious PTSD going on. You never realize it really at the time. I don't think, you just don't. But when I had to go to Walter Reed for, I had a number of other injuries from like shrapnel and TBIs and obviously my dive injury, and had to get all that stuff dealt with. They're like, hey, you have some pretty apparent PTSD symptoms. I wasn't like a lunatic, but a lot of times it just simmers underneath. And once I kind of started admitting that and dealing with that, I think that opened up a whole other kind of batch of strands that I'd never really, I think, given any brain power to. And one of those was, my whole 20s were spent, fighting an insurgency. And I think your 20s, obviously your childhood years, your adolescence, your brain is developing in whatever environment you're raised in. And I think in your 20s, that's kind of when your higher form of cognitive being kind of starts to mature. And I think what you do in your 20s really becomes critical to how the rest of your life, your professional life, is charted. And for me, I was constantly in a leadership position in very chaotic, ill-defined environments. In the mountains of Afghanistan fighting an insurgency, whether I was embedded with the 101st Airborne as an LNO for a soft task force, I was still being looked up to by those troops as, hey, like, you're the SEAL here, you're coordinating strike forces coming in. Like, what should we do? How can we do this? Going on patrol with them, and then of course lead my own team, and I think how that wired my brain was actually perfect for entrepreneurship, because it truly was like, I wasn't operating as a task force at a mega base. Because, sometimes you'd be a commando force or a strike force at a mega base where, yeah, you have your team, but the only time you're really in command is when you leave the wire for your 2 or 3 hour mission and you're back. And you've got 4 layers of commanders above you that are approving everything. They're approving your PowerPoint plan. They're watching you on the drone, and they're asking you what you're up to, and you're giving updates every 5 minutes. Where as a strike force commander, so you are a leader, but in a very kind of, you have a box around you that keeps your leadership authority fairly tight. Whereas in traditional counterinsurgency environment, like, we were on our own. We check it via SATCOM once a day, but like there was no oversight. There was no rules. Like, we were out on our own and basically, hey, here's an area the size of Connecticut, stabilize it, build roads, and like make it America, And it's like, wow, for a 26-year-old guy with 6 SEALs and a bunch of Afghans, that's a pretty broad mandate, but okay,
see what I can do.
Yeah, exactly right. And I realized like those experiences had really wired me for the kind of accountability and mission focus that you need as an entrepreneur, especially like a CEO founder. So, as I was getting out, I really looked at what was the, what I wanted to do. And I think, if I had I'm 38 now, if my 38-year-old self had to talk to my 28-year-old self, I don't think I'd advise him to do the same thing, because, the amount of pain and anguish and just risk and just crazy fucking hard work that you have to go through to start a company from scratch is so much harder than people realize. But I had the vision of the airborne sensors we'd use. I said, man, that was incredible capability. It saved a lot of lives. Pretty sure, it saved some of my teammates' lives on multiple occasions. I'm going to try to take that and apply it to non-combat tasks. Because, around the time I got out, there was a fire in Arizona, the Arnell Mountain Fire. And it burned it burned alive 19 firefighters, the Granite Mountain Hotshots. And there was a movie made about it called Only the Brave. And the team leader was leading his team on this fire, an elite hotshot firefighting team. And the fire started getting out of control, and he moved his team to what was a planned safe zone from the fire. Well, what they didn't realize was the winds had shifted, the fire was shifting, that safe zone was no longer safe. So the team ended up getting burned alive, all 19 of them killed. And basically, the team leader made the right decision with the wrong information. And I knew that if he'd had the information that I'd had as a team leader in Afghanistan, if he'd had those tools, that team would have been alive. I believe that 100%. People can debate it all day long, but I think had he had the capabilities we had as a SEAL team leader, those guys would be alive. So that and border security, a number of other missions, I saw if we could take that airborne ISR capability, make it more economical, more user-friendly, and apply it to kind of domestic public safety tasks, I think there could be an interesting business there. So, my wife and I basically took every cent we had and bought an old surplus plane from the government. My co-founder and I, another veteran, we invented this very basic camera system. And, we started, selling our wares, and forest fire became our main mission. And, I'm proud to say from our barn with 2 of us, we created over 400 jobs worldwide from scratch in the last 9.5 years. We spun out a technology company and scaled that separately. That sold in 2020. We spun out a fuel logistics company, sold that, taken our core company public on the NASDAQ. We're one of the largest aerial firefighting companies in the world. And really our mission is take the absolute best technology, best tactics we can and get them out there in support of our wildland firefighters and our at-risk fire communities. So it's been an awesome journey. I just stepped down as CEO last week, actually, because as you know, I got a new side job. So.
And I love all the stuff that you're posting about Bridger Aero with those scooper planes that you guys, because those are purpose built for you guys, correct?
Yeah, only purpose-built planes in history of the Super Scoopers for wildland fire. Only time they've ever built a plane just to fight fire. Every other plane you see fighting a fire is a converted airliner, a cargo aircraft, or something else. But the Super Scoopers were designed specifically just to fight fire, and they were designed back in the mid-20th century, but then they went out of production during the Great Financial Crisis. So we went up and got the factory rebooted and restarted just for us with our order. And they're just beasts of planes. They're 5,000 horsepower, built for purpose. They're like flying tanks, and they're monsters. So
yeah, the videos you guys are posting were incredible of those.
yeah,
One of my good buddies, I met him when I was stationed out in Korea. He was a 160th pilot. Um, he was looking at you guys as possible options when he was getting out, and he was like, "Dude, the flying that they do is just incredible. Outside of the military, you don't have many options where you can fly low, fly fast. Well, as fast as a
yeah,
scooper plane can go. But, you know, low and fast with a very intentful mission that you're going after. I mean, fighting fires across the country, that we hear them all the time, especially in California,
yeah.
constantly having fire issues. He's like, that'd be a great opportunity for veteran aviators to get into, is flying those types of planes.
No, it is, and you know, veterans have been a key part of our workforce from the beginning. We're an all veteran founding team, and since then, you know, we've hired a lot of vets. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, mission aviation, it's like, you know, airline pilot, that's fine, charter pilot, cargo pilot, but like, you know, our guys don't fly Amazon packages around. They don't charter, you know, rich people around. It's like our pilots get in that cockpit, do one thing, and they fight fire, and they're damn good at it. And like you said, it's very few places that you can do that. You know, legally and be lauded for it, flying low like that. But it's a great mission, and I fly our scoopers as well, and it's literally like the best job in the world. It's awesome, not just because it is fun, but also, you know, the mission. You know, when you're literally coming over someone's house and you're flying right over their house, getting ready to bomb, you know, a fire that's coming towards them. You know, when they're out in the yard waving at you, or they tape on the top of their bar, you know, thank you, and you know, like you're really having an impact. Then you land back at the airport and you run into all the ground firefighters, you know, at the bar, or people who have evacuated their homes or there at the airport, you know, thanking you, giving you thank you cards. The kids are hugging you. They want pictures by the plane. It's a really cool mission. And, you know, it's a problem that's not going anywhere. Our company's growing, you know, tremendously. We're still growing today. And it's going to be a hell of a ride. I obviously handed the baton to my team, and I know they're going to do great things with it. So
how did you get to the decision then? You know, you've had, by all measurements, a very successful career. You've been a SEAL. You started one company. You've started multiple since then. You've sold many of them. You're on the Nasdaq stock exchange. What made you decide to put that all aside and say, all right, I'm going to go tackle this new problem of how I feel politics are being run in the U.S. And you're like, I need to do something, and not just something minor, not like running for mayor, not that absolutely anything wrong with running for mayor, but I'm going to go to the full national stage. I'm going to run for the Senate position in my state.
You know, it was really Afghanistan. I mean, watching that Afghan pullout in 2021 for me, as I'm sure it was for you guys, was just, it was an absolute gut punch. I mean, I was ashamed of our flag. I was ashamed to be an American. You know, I only did, you know, a few tours over in the Middle East. A lot of guys did a lot more than I did, but, you know, we all sacrificed a lot. I lost friends. You guys lost friends. You know, I got wounded there. My wife served there as a Marine. And I was flying water bombers in Chico, California during the collapse of Kabul. So by day, I'm bombing fires, protecting our country. And by night, I'm on the phone with interpreters, commandos, American citizens, friends, and allies, just trying to get people out of there, trying to get them on a C-17, trying to get them through the gate so they can get on a plane and get out of there before, you know, their family gets raped and they get killed. Because as we know, they were targeting all the people that helped us during our war. And, you know, regardless of people's feelings on the war in Afghanistan, you know, there's a growing isolationist movement. We never should have been in the first place, this and that. Okay, that's fine. Like, whatever. You can think what you want to think about why we went there. But how we left there was an absolute disgrace. And we did the same thing in Iraq, you know, 10 years prior. Let's not forget about that. It wasn't as immediate of a collapse, but it definitely eventually collapsed and metastasized into ISIS. And then we were doing the same thing again 10 years later. And for my wife and I, we were looking at each other. We have 4 young kids. Like, how do we tell our kids they should join the military? Because we're proud of our service. We're proud to serve. But, like, how can we, with a straight face, tell our kids, hey, you should join up and you should serve? Because, you know, they're going to go send you to fight wars that literally we're going to walk away from. We're going to walk away from. And as a leader, as a unit commander, I have to sleep at night knowing that I made decisions that cost guys their legs or their arms, you know. And I told them to fight hard because, you know, I thought we were, you know, our government had our back. And now I look at the places we fought and, like, I mean, it's like sticking your hand in water and pulling it out. What the hell did we go there for? Why were we there? If we were just going to walk away for political expediency, why the hell were we there? Why did we all lose friends? Why did, most people spend their 20s, working a chairlift or being a surf bum. Like we spent our 20s eating dirt in Afghanistan, fighting for our country. And so, that experience for me, I was never really political before that. I've never run for anything before, but that experience for me was really crystallizing. And that was the experience for me that got me involved in the political landscape when I started, contacting our local candidates. Ryan Zinke, our Western congressman, he was a SEAL, and, I'd known him and our governor. I said, hey guys, listen, count on me, I'll host fundraisers, I'll give surrogate speeches, whatever I can do to help. But like, this experience has taught me that like we are a nation in crisis. We are a nation at a crossroads. We're losing our soul as a country, and we need to get it back. And frankly, we need a new generation of leaders. We cannot keep sending the same people back to DC for decades and decades and decades and decades on end and expect things to change. And we have a political class that just doesn't seem to care about everyday Americans. Like, they make decisions every day that are selling us out, and they're selling out the future of our children. And as someone who put everything on the line for this country, as you guys did, I refuse to stand by and watch it to continue. I just refuse to watch it continue to happen. And I'm so sick and tired of these career politicians that have done nothing but run for office, especially when they use us, when they pander to us. Oh, I'll take care of our veterans. Nothing's more important than our veterans. Oh, we'll do this for our veterans and that. I'm like, bullshit. Like, give me a break. Like, stop pandering to me and acting like you care about our needs. Because if you did, we wouldn't have record high veteran suicides. If you cared about us, you wouldn't be giving 3 times as much money to illegal immigrants as you are to veterans. If you really cared, we wouldn't have record high veteran homelessness all over this nation. If you really cared, you wouldn't be sending us to go fight in wars that you have no intention of ever winning. So if you really care about us, then do the right thing and stop, lying to us every single day. So, for me, I think our generation, it's time for us to stand up. For most of our generation, military or not, we had to get jobs in the great financial crisis. We had to fight our nation's longest war. We were all in high school and we watched the towers come down. It's time for us to stand up. We can't continue to let 85, 90-year-old people run our country. The future does not belong to them. It belongs to us, and it belongs to our children. So it's about time we stand up and get involved and stop watching from the sidelines, because things aren't going very well. I don't care what anybody says. We're the best country in the world. I've been in 93 countries around the world. I love America. I really, really do. And I think we're so lucky to have been born here. We're so lucky to be Americans, and so many Americans take that for granted. They just take for granted that this is a gift we've been given of being Americans. Millions of people around the world die trying to come here to become Americans, and we just take it for granted. And I think our generation is in a unique position to stand up and be part of the solution. So that's why I'm doing it. And part of the reason is this race is incredibly important. This race in Montana will determine control of the Senate. And whether you're Republican or Democrat, it almost doesn't matter. We have to get new leadership in DC. And this race in Montana is critical to that, because my opponent, probably a nice guy, I honestly don't know him very well, but the reality is he's voted for every single policy, from inflation to open borders to hollowing out our military to selling out our veterans. It's like constantly voting to undermine everything that this nation's supposed to stand for. And it's time for us to stand up. So that's why I'm doing it. I'd much rather be running my companies, be with my 4 young kids. Montana's an amazing place to live and grow a business and raise your family. But, we got to stand up, and we got to be part of the solution.
It's extremely commendable that you're sacrificing the things. You've already been sacrificing your entire adult life, basically, and now taking up the torch again to take on a new task, a new challenge that is obviously very pressing to everybody involved. For veterans out there that are interested in politics or have similar sentiment to you about how things are going, what are some steps they can take to get involved in politics, both at the local level, state level, national level?
Great question, and thanks for asking it. I think, what I've heard across the country from state political parties, state, leadership, is a deep desire to have the veterans get more engaged, and in any way possible, whether it's as candidates or whether it's as, local party bosses, whether it's as delegates. But, right now we're at our lowest participation percentage in history of veterans in the U.S. Capitol. It used to be like 75% of Congress and Senate had worn the uniform. Now it's like 17%. And that's a problem because, I mean, that's the body that decides, if we're going to go to war or not. That's the body that decides how we resource our military. That's that body that decides, our policy decisions around the military. So I think having people there that have served in uniform is very important because those people, veterans, understand mission, they understand service, they understand what it means to, set foot on another nation's soil, and put your life on the line. And they also understand how to work as a team. Like my co-founder of my company, also a military veteran. He's a lifelong Democrat. I'm a lifelong Republican. Like we're best friends and we get along great. We don't have to agree on anything, but we can still respect each other. And that's something we also lost as a nation is we can still love our country and we can still respect each other and get things done together, even if we don't agree on everything. And I think that's also something that we're missing, and that's something veterans can help bridge. So, but veterans get involved. I mean, your local state parties, your county parties, your central committees in your county, reach out and get involved. It's not fun. It's not glorious. I can promise you. Like politics, I mean, going to the meetings, going to, the old dining halls and VFWs and American Legions, like it's going to take time. But, if you don't get involved, it's very hard for you to express frustration at the failure of the system if you're not helping to try to fix it. And, and that goes for voting too. I mean, the most important thing everyone can do is vote. I mean, just make sure your voice is heard. I mean, like 55% of Americans vote, which is a slap in the face to all of us who fought for that right. I mean, we're so lucky to have the ability to choose our own leaders. Sometimes that choice is an illusion. I get it. But like, it's still a choice. And for people not to exercise that choice after so many young men and women have died over 250 years to give us that right is really frustrating. So,
well, especially when you look back to Iraq, when they had their first election, like they were literally being threatened with their life, and people were still dipping their finger in the ink and showing it on camera. Be like, I voted. I'm risking my life by showing this, but I'm proud to say that I voted for this. Meanwhile, as you said, we got 55% showing up to vote where there's no threat to their life or really their livelihood if they don't.
I remember one of those polling stations in Baghdad, it was just a terrible suicide bomber. And I think it was something like 100 people, were killed. And our task force, we went out there to basically collect like fingers and eyeballs and brain matter and stuff to basically, we needed to figure out who the bombers were so we could do biometric testing on whatever we could find. And I remember, obviously it was disgusting. I had a gallon Ziploc bag full of tiny body parts, that we were picking up and taking to forensics so we could figure out who the bomber was and obviously trace back, where it came from. And like you said, those people took that risk to go vote, and we have Americans who just don't care enough to do it. So you're absolutely right. So it's time for our generation to stand up. I mean, whether it's the border, whether it's inflation, whether it's Ukraine, Afghanistan, Taiwan, China, whether it's gas prices or boys and girls sports. I mean, whatever it is, whatever the issue is that gets you motivated for younger Americans, especially veterans, you got to stand up and get involved because, if we don't fix it, no one's going to save this country. Donald Trump's not going to save it. Joe Biden's not going to save it. I'm not going to save it. Like, we have to save it, and we have to chip in and do it together. That's what it's going to take us as people get involved.
Well, I appreciate it. So one of the things we like to ask as we close up with our guests is, the name of the show is Harder, Not Smarter. There's some things in life you just need to be harder for, like making it through buds. There's no life hack. There is no easy button or shortcut to success there. You just need to put on your man pants or your big girl pants and get the work done. What is it you do nowadays? I mean, you have a million things on your plate. But what is it you do nowadays to keep that edge, to make sure you're not becoming complacent, and keep that desire to keep pushing forward and improving?
I mean, love. Love is the greatest force ever known to mankind. I mean, it just is. And I love my kids. I love my wife, who I'm lucky she still hangs out with me. And I love this country. And, I love my employees in my company. I really do. I treat them like family. I'll pay their medical bills myself sometimes. I'll make sure they, I'll fly them across the country to get a medical procedure, whatever it takes. Like, and I think, for me, like, I love this country enough that, I will go to every diner in Montana. I'll go to every county. I'll shake every hand that I can see. Like, I will do whatever it takes because, not because I want to be a politician, but because I see our nation's at a crossroads. And we need a new generation of leaders to step up. So, find that thing that you love, because you will work you will work as hard as anyone ever has. If you truly love something, you'll work so damn hard to protect it, and support it and see it thrive, that you'll run through walls for it. And for me, that makes me run harder every day. And you're absolutely right. I just had a young man in my office the other day who was getting ready to go to Buds. He was on his way to San Diego, to check in. He's like, "What advice do you have?" And like you said, I said, "Hey, listen, the best words I ever heard and the best advice I give is don't be a pussy." Like there's no other way to say it, man.
Yep.
Show up, get ready for the pain, and just take it and keep on running, because there's no other way to get through. There's no hack. There's no shortcut. It's just grit, man. Put it in drive and keep rolling.
I love it. Thank you. So for all of our listeners out there, where can they find you, information about you, your campaign, Bridger, donations, anything that you want to be?
Yeah, well, thanks. I think obviously for Bridger Aerospace, just bridgeraerospace.com. You can follow our company. It's been an amazing growth story. We do important work supporting, firefighters and folks all around the world. A lot of the topics we talk about, I actually wrote a book last year called Mudslingers about the history of aero firefighting, a little bit of my story of how I got into it. All the proceeds go to charity. They go to benefit the families of fallen wildland firefighters. So that book's called Mudslingers, mudslingersbook.com. And then, and again, 100% of the proceeds go to fallen firefighters' families. And then, obviously for the campaign, tim4mt.com, tim4mtformt.com. They can check out, why this race in Montana is important. It's not just a Montana Senate seat. I mean, this will help determine, the course of the nation. We have very serious national policy discussions happening right now, and the Senate is a very structural part of that. So I think for younger Americans who want to see common sense leadership and just leadership that actually is focused on what's best for them, they need to take an interest in this race. So I encourage them to do so.
Well, thanks, Tim.
I got one last question, Tim.
Luck.
Yeah,
please.
Have you bought the domain name for tim4president.com? Because you got my vote, my friend.
No, I have not, and I think if I did run for president, I'd be running as a single president, because my wife is already like, this is. So, yeah, we'll take care of the Senate first, and then hopefully I'll come back and be back on the ranch in no time. So
that's why I said the comment I did at the beginning, man. Politicians, especially national level politics, sounds like my own personal hell. It takes a very determined, very diligent person to want to put themselves and their family through that. You see it all. Colin Powell didn't do it because he didn't want to put his family through it. A lot of people wanted to see him run.
Exactly right, and it is terrible. I mean, the character assassination, the attacks, it's ruthless, and there's no boundaries. They've been trying to put our company out of business, attacking our employees, going after families. It's just terrible. There's no rules anymore. But that's all the more reason why we need good, decent, honorable people to step up and run, because our constitutional republic was designed to be run by men of character. And I think we have a lot of men and women of character, but we also have a lot that are only focused on power. And I think our generation has some unique experiences to step up and save this country, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Awesome, Tim. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Great time. We'll see you.
Take care.